Hello everyone, and welcome to this video tutorial on how to install DSpace 7 on a Debian 11 server. I'll be using VirtualBox for this tutorial, and in fact I have a video showing how to build the environment that I'll be using, so I'm going to put a link to that up in the corner and down in the description below. Yeah, because we're covering both the back end and the front end installation, this is going to be a pretty long video, so we should just jump right into it. So I'm going to start by opening up my virtual machine. I always like to run it as administrator. It seems to help with network issues and things like that. I'm on a work computer and don't have full control over the network, um, so you'll see that I have a list of virtual machines here, and again I have a link to how to go about setting up a virtual machine for this kind of environment. What I usually like to do though is I now have this base system and I don't really want to do anything with it. So I'm just going to clone for this particular tutorial. That way if I mess things up, I don't have to go and reinstall this again. So I'm just going to go ahead and clone. It's up to you whether or not you want to do that. And that'll take a little while. So I'm just going to pause while it does this. Okay, so after a minute or so, my clone is ready, and I'm just going to double click on it and open it up. Of course, I have guest editions installed on this particular machine, and again, all of that information is in the video that I'm linking to down below for building this environment. I'm just going to click on Switch. And so now I'm in full screen mode for my VM. We're just booting up. Okay, I'm going to log into my machine. Okay, so there's a little bit of housekeeping I want to do before I get started. I'm just going to click on this little icon down here. I'm going to search for terminal because we are going to need the terminal for this. I'm going to right click on this and pin to task manager because I'll need it a few times. In addition to that, I'm going to need Firefox. You can choose any browser you want. However, I think Firefox just comes standard with this. Normally it's not the browser I use, but it does the job, so I'm going to just go with that. Okay, so I'm going to open both Firefox and the terminal. And the terminal is probably hard to read, so I'm going to go ahead and click on Settings, go to Edit Current Profile. I'm going to go to Appearance, and down here I can choose the font size, and 16 usually is pretty good for videos. So I'm going to go with that. Click OK, Apply, OK, and then that should be a little easier to see. And I guess what I'm going to do is maybe kind of have somewhat of a split screen here. And maybe I just want to make this a little bigger, so Control plus 110%. That's probably good. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we need our instructions. So I'm just going to do a search for DSpace installation. And we're looking for this Lyricist wiki here, so you want to make sure that that's where you're going. Okay, and so this page has brought us to the DSpace 6 installation. We want DSpace 7, so I'm going to click on DSpace 7. So you just want to make sure this is where you end up on DSpace 7.x. Okay, so what we're going to do is go through, whoops, I didn't mean to do that. Open this up. What we're going to do is go through all of the installing instructions on DSpace. So I'm just going to click that installing DSpace link. And what we're going to cover today is all of this, which is quite a bit. It can be a little tricky to do this. The instructions are great. They really have some great documentation here. It's just the problem is configuring all of the dependencies like Solr and Tomcat and permissions and all that. It's going to vary between systems, so they can't just tell you exactly how to configure these things because they don't know what operating system you're using. So we're focusing specifically on Debian 11 in this case. Okay, so what we're going to do is just kind of scroll down here. So installation overview, it's important to note that DSpace 7 now consists of a front end and a back end. So before this, DSpace 6 and before, my understanding is they didn't do a front end and a back end. So we're going to have to install and configure both. And they're telling us that they recommend that the backend be installed first. And there's very good reason for that. It's simply the user interface, the front end, relies on the backend in order to display collections and that sort of thing. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to look at are the backend requirements. So before we go ahead with the installation instructions, we need to make sure we have all of this stuff. So rather than just kind of pointing at the link and talking about it, we'll just go through each section. Here we need a Unix-like OS or Microsoft Windows. So this is going to work on Mac OS and Linux as Unix-like systems, and also Microsoft. But we're using Debian 11 in this case, so we're good to go. We have Linux. So the next thing they're telling us is we need the Java JDK 11 or 17. Normally I like to go with the most recent versions of things that are available, and OpenJDK 17 is available in Debian using the package manager, the app package manager. However, when I tested that out, it works. It just takes extra configurations, and I think it makes better sense to kind of do this somewhat from the perspective of the operating system. So using Debian 11, OpenJDK is the one that is the default currently as of this video. That may change. OpenJDK 11 is going to be supported until I believe September of 2023. So eventually it's going to change to 17, I suspect. But in the meantime, I think rather than just install JDK 11, I want to do instructions that are going to work in the future as well, or hopefully work in the future as well. So in that case, what we can do is simply install the default JDK for, and JDK stands for Java Development Kit. It's needed for compiling Java on your server. But if we use the default, it should work in the future. It may install 17, it may install 11, it may install something else, but we're going to do the default. So, and actually, before I really go too much further, I should probably do sudo apt update and sudo apt upgrade. I'm just going to put a -y here. You may want to do this too, just to make sure everything is up to date. So this is going to update our package manager and upgrade things and make sure we have the most current source for everything in the apt repository. I'm going to hit enter, do my password, and this is probably going to take a little while, so I'm just going to pause for now. Okay, so I was noticing that as the updates were happening, Firefox was updated, so I'm probably going to have to restart it. I'm just going to copy this URL. I'm going to close Firefox and reopen it. Just this way we don't have to worry about Firefox giving us a restart warning when we're in the middle of something. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and paste that URL back here. Okay, back to the instructions. So we were here at the Java JDK. Okay, so now we are going to install Java. We will run sudo apt install default -jdk. I'm going to go ahead and hit enter. I'm not doing the -y because I want to show you all something. Okay, so you'll see here that the following new packages will be installed. The important ones are really the default JDK and let's see, the OpenJDK 11 JDK. So this is going to give us everything that we need. In the future, this might say OpenJDK 17, and by that point, I suspect you won't have to do extra configurations to make JDK 17 work. So in this case, we're going with 11. I suspect it'll be updated in the next year and a half or so, but for now, this is what it is. So do I want to continue? Yes, and enter. And I'll pause as it does its thing. Okay, so it looks like we have successfully installed the OpenJDK 11 and default JDK for our Debian system. We might as well just check to see how that went. I think we can do java-version, and you can see that we are running OpenJDK, or JDK version 11.0.14. Okay, so now there's one more thing that we need to do here. I'm just going to go ahead and clear, right? Am I going to clear? Yes. Okay, so we need to set the Java home variable, and we can do that by going to CD for change directory, and /etc/ and I'll just go ahead and hit enter here, and then ls to list the contents of this directory. And you'll see that there is a file here called environment. We want to edit this file to include our Java home variable. So we'll do that with sudo nano environment. And if you just do the first two letters and hit tab, it will autocomplete for you, or should. Go ahead and hit enter. And it is an empty document. And actually, now that I think of it, I just want to show people quickly actually where the Java home variable is. I'm just going to do Control X to get out of there, and maybe it's a good idea to check to make sure it's in the same place for you as well. But if you go to CD for change directory /usr/lib/jvm and enter and ls. This is actually the home directory right here. So it's the one with the dashes in it. And actually what I can do is just CD into that. So I'll just first two letters, tab, put the one in there, tab. Okay, so we're going to go into there, and then I'm just going to copy this path here because this is the path to the Java home. And we'll just CD back into etc. And then here I'm just going to sudo nano environment, enter. And then what I'm going to do is type in all caps Java underscore home, and then stop using caps and equals. I'm going to put this in quotes. I don't think you have to, but I'm just going to anyhow. So we're going to put this path variable as the Java home variable. If we do Control X and then Y to say yes to saving, and then enter. Okay, now if we echo, don't forget to put in, it's a variable, so we need to put in the $, and Java underscore home. You'll see that it's empty. So what we need to do is source this file. You could restart the computer, or actually you could just close the terminal and open it back up, and it should have that Java home variable. But we're just going to run, take off caps. We're going to run source, and I don't know if you have to do the full path or not. I seem to recall that if you don't, it's kind of problematic. But so source, etc, environment, enter. And now if I hit the up arrow, I can get to the command I ran for echo Java home, enter, and you'll see that it's there now. So we're good to go here. Okay, I am going to look at the instructions again. So I believe we've done everything we need to for Java home. Yes, we've installed, we set our home variable. Okay, good. I think now we can move on to Maven. So we're just going to install Apache Maven. And if you're ever in doubt as to what version you're going to get, normally you can do apt cache search, and then in this case I'm going to search for Maven. Right? I spelled that wrong, Maven. And usually you can get an idea of which package is going to be installed. Actually, that screen's too small. I'm just going to run that again. Make it a little easier to sort through. Oh, they're just telling us it is Java Software Project Management and Comprehension Tool. So we're not getting the version there. I do know that they're going to... Oh, did I see it? No. Okay. So we're just going to hope for the best and that we get the right version. I'm just going to put that down. We want 3.3 or above. Having done this before, I know that it is the right version. So sudo apt maven will get us Maven. Sudo apt, oh, you gotta install, sorry. Sudo apt install Maven. And Y for yes. Pause. Okay, so once it's installed, we can see that it's 3.6.3, and you could always just run the Maven command mvn-v to get the version of that. So 3.6.3, we're good to go there. So Maven is a Java build tool. It is actually, in this case, it is used to build the DSpace installer. We don't need to configure it for anything. We just simply need to be able to run Maven to build our installer, which we'll do a little bit later. We don't need to configure a Maven proxy. So the next thing we're looking at is Apache Ant. So this is a Java build tool. So once Maven builds the installer, the Ant Java build tool builds the DSpace backend. So these are both required. And to install Ant, and it looks like 1.10 is what we need. We'll check on that. Whoops, sudo apt install Ant. We'll check on that after we install. I don't know, does it tell us here? No. Okay, I'm just going to do Y and let that do its thing. Oh, okay, that was quick. And okay, so we've installed that, and now we don't need to configure Ant for anything. It's just a matter of using it to build the DSpace backend. So what we're going to do now is install our relational database, and we're going to go with PostgreSQL. You could also do Oracle 10 or later. As of this recording, the default PostgreSQL on Debian in the app repository is 13. And that's another one of those things where you could do apt cache search PostgreSQL. This will give us an idea of what packages are available and what version and all that. So it looks like we've got PostgreSQL 13, so we're going to be good to go there. Scroll back down here and go ahead and clear that. And we're going to run sudo apt install PostgreSQL PostgreSQL-client, which I'm not sure if it's necessary or not, but I'm just going to put it in there to be safe. And then finally, PostgreSQL-contrib, contrib. Now, the reason why we are installing PostgreSQL contrib is because we need to install the PG crypto extension. And they're telling us here that it is included in this package in Debian-based and Red Hat-based operating systems. Okay, so with these three things, I'm going to go ahead. So we have sudo apt install PostgreSQL, as well as PostgreSQL client and PostgreSQL contrib. I'm going to do enter. And yes, I would like to install them. And this might take a while, so I'm going to go ahead and pause. Okay, so we have success. You can now start the database server using this command here. So I'm going to copy that so I don't have to type it. And you'll probably have to run it as a super user. So sudo, and then I'm just going to paste the command here, hit enter, and we should be good to go. We can check on this by running systemctl status PostgreSQL. And when we run that, we should see this active directive here. So looks like that's up and running, and we can continue. So let's see. We have, maybe it'd be helpful to do that. Maybe that. Make that a little bigger. And just in case, I'm just going to make sure that's a little bit bigger. Oops. Okay, there. Hopefully that makes it a little easier to read. Okay, so where were we? Okay, so we've installed the PG crypto extension. Like I said, that's in the PostgreSQL contrib. We're not using Windows, so we don't need to worry. Unicode, specifically UTF support, must be enabled, but this is enabled by default. Well, sometimes when they say things are enabled by default, they're not, so it might be a good idea to check on this. And at this point, what that means is we have installed PostgreSQL, and when we installed PostgreSQL, a new user was created called Postgres, I believe. And I guess what I could do is I could do groups and Postgres. Okay. So it's Postgres is the username, and that user is part of the Postgres group and the SSL cert, but we don't need to worry about that. What we do need to do is give this user a password so that we can log in as that user and check to see if UTF-8 is enabled. We're also going to need this user a little bit further down the line when we start building the databases. So what we can do is sudo passwd for password and postgres and enter. And I'm going to just use password for that password. And actually all of the passwords I'm using on this development system is password. That way I don't forget, and it just makes it easier for me when I'm developing to use password so I never forget. Okay, so we've given a password to that user, and what we can do at this point is log in as that user. So if you run the command su for switch user, and then what was it, postgres, and enter. So they're going to ask for the Postgres user's password. Put in my password, and you'll see now we are logged in as the Postgres user, which is the root user for your Postgres databases. Now at this point, we need to run the command let's see, we want to run what we want to run is psql-c, and then in quotes we want show space server underscore encoding, because we do want to make sure that UTF is supported here. And if I hit enter, we see now that UTF is indeed supported and we're good to go there. And I do think it's important to check that even though it's considered the default, because like I said, sometimes they say it's the default and it is not necessarily the default. So to get out of the Postgres user, I can run the command exit, and actually I need to take off caps lock, exit, and I am back to my super user Jeremiah. Okay, so now once installed, we'll need to enable TCP IP connections, and they give us instructions on how to go about doing that. And so what they're saying is in the postgresql.conf file, there is a line that says listen addresses equals localhost. And they're telling us this is the default in recent PostgreSQL releases, but you should at least check it. So they're right, because it is not the default and it does need to be uncommented. Now we're going to find this file in the PostgreSQL etc directory. So what we're going to do is cd into, actually we can just do PostgreSQL, and then, I forget exactly where to go from there. So I'm just going to cd into PostgreSQL. If you weren't in the etc directory, you need to make sure that you include the full path, but I was already there, so it didn't matter. And now from here, I'm just going to run ls to list what's at 13. So we want to cd into 13, and then I think it's main. Yep, cd into main. Okay, and I believe this is where we want to be. So ls to list the contents, and actually the two files that we're after are these two right here. So the first one in the PostgreSQL conf uncomment that line. So we're going to run sudo nano PostgreSQL conf and enter. And I'm just going to use my arrow keys to come down here, file locations. We're good there, and listening addresses, localhost. So despite it being considered the default for this to be uncommented, it's not. So it's always good to check these things. Okay, now I am going to hit Control X to exit, and then Y for yes to save, and then enter so that we keep the name. Okay, now we are going to tighten up security a little bit by entering this line in the pg_hba.conf file. So we will run sudo nano pg_hba.conf and enter. And we need to use the arrow key to scroll down to this section here, so the database's administrative login. And I'm just going to copy this line right here, copy all this, and then I'll probably put a comment here. DSpace configurations, and I'm just going to paste this here. And it's probably a good idea to explain what exactly this means. So really what it means is there is going to be a database called DSpace, which we haven't created yet, but we will. There is also going to be a user called DSpace, and we just want to make sure that they have access to the PostgreSQL server. And so what this does is it ensures that really, DSpace and the Postgres user are really the only ones that are able to actually do anything with this DSpace database. Okay, so let's go ahead and Control X and Y, and yes, that is the name that I want this file to have. All right, so and you'll notice that I put it before everything else, and that's just because they're telling us here that we need to put this before any lines matching all databases. All right, so now they want us to restart PostgreSQL, and we can do that with a systemd service. This was set up as a systemd service, which is great. It makes managing things a lot easier. So I'm going to do sudo system control, or CTL, sudo system control. What was I doing? Restart, and PostgreSQL. All right, so sudo system control restart PostgreSQL. It wrapped a little there. I'm going to go ahead and hit enter. And now if I do system control status PostgreSQL and enter, it's active, it's running, and we're good. So I'm just going to hit Q to quit that. All right, so I think we have successfully installed PostgreSQL. We're not installing Oracle, so we don't need to worry about that. Okay, so next what we're going to do is look at Apache Solr. This is the dependency I struggled the most with. I really wasn't familiar with Solr before this, but I think I have figured out what we need to do to get everything running the way we would like it to. We can't use the apt repository to get this software, so we're going to have to kind of install it ourselves. Fortunately, it's fairly easy to do. We could set it up as a systemd service. However, I'm not going to do that because it takes extra configurations. We're going to go the easy route and simply unpack it and run it as is. So, in order to do that, they are telling us that we can download Solr from the Solr site, and we'll do that in just a second. But what we're going to do is they're suggesting that we can put our download in either the opt directory or the user/local directory. We're going to go with opt. And to do this, what we need to do, I'm just going to do a Google search for Solr download. And we have the Solr downloads. As of this video, the most recent version is 8.11.1. I'm going to get the zip file. We want the binary release. We don't want the source because we'd have to compile it ourselves. And we could simply use the binary release. We're not doing anything too sophisticated with Solr here, so this is okay. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to go to this PGP, and I'm going to right-click on that, and I'm going to copy the link. Now, what I'm going to do is, let's go back to DSpace instructions. And again, I'm going to go to the opt directory. So cd for change directory, / and you have to put that / in because that's the root of the file system. So you can't go any further back than that. And so the opt directory appears in the root directory. I'm going to hit enter. Let's just ls to list what's in this directory. And right now it's just the VirtualBox guest editions. Okay, now what I'm going to do is run, well, let's see, lsla. So root owns this folder. Let's do sudo wget, and then I'm going to, let's see, let's open this up a little. I'm going to paste the URL that we just copied. However, I think we're going to need to remove ASC at the end. So you want to make sure that anything that appears after the P and zip is deleted. And the reason why I'm doing this is it goes directly to the downloads. If you just try to wget the download itself, there's like a download directive and it doesn't work. So I'm just going to hit enter, and we are now downloading the Solr 8 zip file. Okay, so once it is downloaded, I'm just going to run the ls command. We'll see that we have our zip file there. And I am simply going to run sudo unzip Solr zip file and enter. Okay, now if I do ls-la, I see that the Solr directory is here and it is owned by root. It's not a good idea to run Solr as root, so what I'm going to do is make my user the owner of this directory, which you do need to do, perhaps not at this point, but I would recommend you do it at this point anyhow. So sudo, what is it? Ch own dash R, which is recursive. That means everything will be owned by the user I'm about to identify. So in this case, it's going to be my sudo user, Jeremiah. I'm going to do the colon and also do Jeremiah group. So it's actually, this is the owner, this is the group that has access to it. Okay, so now all I need to do is just type the directory name, and I just type the first few letters and then tab to autocomplete and enter. Now if I do ls-la, you'll see that my user owns this, which is great because now we don't have to use sudo, and if we did, it causes issues because it messes up all of the permissions. So very good idea to have your kind of sudo user be the owner of this. Great. Now, Solr is not currently running, so we need to make sure that it runs. And because we did not install this as systemd, as a systemd service, which we could do, but it kind of messes things up, so I don't really recommend doing that. If we change directories into Solr and ls, you'll see that there is a binary directory here. So this is where all of the commands for Solr appear. I'm just going to cd into that, cd into bin, ls, and you'll see that we have a number of commands that we can run here. One of which is the install underscore Solr underscore service. So that would, if you ran that, it would then have Solr managed by systemd. It would become a service that is managed by systemd. And again, I tried doing that just because in some ways it would make things easier, but in this case it doesn't. So I'm not going to do that. Really what I'm looking at is this command right here, the Solr command. Now the problem with setting things up this way and just using the Solr command is every time you log in, you'll have to come and run this command in order to get Solr up and running. But there's a better way of doing that. And really what I'm going to do is just copy this directory path here. And what I'm going to do is just type cd for change directory with no parameters and hit enter, and what that does is it takes me to my home directory. So if I do pwd print working directory and enter, you'll see that I'm in my home directory. That's where I want to be. If I do ls-la, you will see that we have some dot files here. The one that we're after is this profile. So what we're going to do is put a directive in this profile so that every time my user, Jeremiah, logs in, Solr will automatically start. If I don't do this, you have to run the command manually every time. So this is just a better way of doing things. What I'm going to do is nano and then dot profile and enter. And just before this if statement, I don't think it really matters where you put things, but what I'm going to do is just tell the system that, hey, when Jeremiah logs in, run this command. This is what this profile document does. And really all I need to do is just paste that directory path that I had. And then if I do a / and then Solr, and then a space and start, this is the command to start Solr. So when I log in, this command right here is going to be run. And actually what I'm going to do is just copy this right now. And I'm going to go ahead and Control X to exit Y to save, and then enter. Okay, so what I'd like to do is just show you that this is where Solr will end up being run. If we do localhost, and then colon, and then 8983, which is the port that Solr is listening on, I'm going to go ahead and hit enter. Unable to connect. It's because we haven't started it yet. So that command that I just put in the profile document is going to be run every time I log in, but I'm already logged in, so it didn't start. So we're going to have to, at this point, run the command manually, or we could restart and it should start on its own. But I'm just going to paste that command that I put in the profile to show you how this works. So when I log in, it will run that command. And they are setting up the ports and all that. Okay, so started Solr server on port 8983, which is where we are here. If I go ahead and reload this, we should get our Solr admin page. So far, so good. I think that covers everything for Solr. And now we can get back to our DSpace instructions. Okay, just quickly look over this. Solr can be obtained. Yes, we did that. We put it in there. It is not necessary to... Okay, so we are going to do the Solr course a little bit later. All right, so we are now on the servlet engine. So we're looking at installing Apache Tomcat 9. We have some configurations to do here. So the very first thing we're going to want to do there is I'm going to clear this. Okay, so to get Tomcat 9, we will just run sudo apt install Tomcat 9 and Y, and it'll take a little while, so I'll pause. Okay, so Tomcat is installed, and we have a few configurations that we need to do. And what they're telling us is the Tomcat owner must have read-write access to the DSpace installation directory. So we're kind of jumping ahead of ourselves here, and honestly, I think it's better to come back to this one a little bit later, because frankly, at the moment, it's going to work much better if my super user, Jeremiah, has full permissions on that directory, which we haven't created yet. So important to know, we need to come back and deal with this, and I think I'll actually end up showing you why. But for now, let's not worry about it. Okay, same deal with this part here, the other option. We're actually going to go with this first option here. The second option doesn't quite work the way I want it to, so this one's just easier. Okay, so they're also telling us that on Debian systems, you may also need to modify or override the Tomcat service file. So this one right here, to specify the DSpace installation directory. We don't have the installation directory yet, but we can set this up without any issues. And I'm going to do that. And, you know, honestly, I just kind of took this at face value. I haven't tested to see if it would work or not if you don't do this. So to get to the Tomcat service file, we would go to cd, so change directory. It's etc. Tomcat is set up as a systemd service, so that is where you're going to find your .service file. So it's etc systemd system. So we want this path right here, and enter. And then if I just ls to list the contents there, we will see, oh, you know what? I went to the wrong place because there is no Tomcat service here. But actually, if we did ls-la, we'd get a pretty good idea of where those service files are located because we have some links here. So this service here, for instance, is pointing to lib/systemd/system. So I'd kind of forgotten that is where it is. So I'm going to now change directories. So cd /etc/lib. because this is what it's telling me. And then it's systemd, system, right? Lib systemd, something's wrong here. Oh, because it's not etc. So cd /lib /systemd and /system. Okay, this should bring us where we need to be. So ls to list the contents, and we see that the Tomcat service file is right there. And they're telling us that we need to add this line here. So this is owned by root, so we need to do sudo nano, what was it? Tomcat 9 service. And under the service here, under the configuration, we want, that's not right. Let's see. Oh, here we go. No, it's under security. So if you scroll down towards the bottom, under security, there is this section here. And let's see, I want to type read write paths equals /DSpace. Okay, so this is the installation directory that we haven't set up yet. We're just doing the configuration right now. And actually, I guess right after this, we'll go ahead and create the installation directory. But for now, we can just put that in there. We don't need to worry about anything. We can do Control X, Y, and enter. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is just cd into the root directory. So if you just do /, this will bring you to the very top of the file system. Can't go any further back than that. And what I'm going to do is run sudo make, or mkdir for make directory, and /, you need to put that / in there, DSpace, and that will create our directory. And if I do ls-la, you'll see we have that new directory here, and it is owned by root. We don't want that. We want it to be our super user for now. Eventually we're going to come back and we're going to make Tomcat the owner of this directory. But for now, we need full permissions. It's best not to do this with sudo because then files and directories end up being created under the root user, and that can cause problems. So what I'm going to do is sudo ch own -r for recursive, and actually there's nothing in that directory right now, so it probably doesn't matter, but /, oh nope, we want our super user. I'm going to do my super user group as well, so the : Jeremiah, and then / DSpace, and enter. And now if I do ls-la, you'll see that my super user now owns this, which is exactly what we want. Okay, so next thing we need to do is, we've done this read-write paths. Next thing we need to do is ensure that Tomcat has enough memory to run DSpace. So they're telling us we need to set the Java_ops variable to this value here. And what I'm going to do is just copy that. Just highlight it, copy it, and so what we'll do is sudo nano /etc environment. So it's that environment file that we had edited earlier for the Java home variable. We're going to do the same thing here. So I'm going to go ahead and hit enter. I'm going to arrow down, and I'm just going to paste what they told me to put here. So in this case, you do want to make sure you have quotation marks because there are spaces here. Okay. Now if I do Control X to exit, Y to save, and enter, and of course we have changed that environment variables document, so we need to source it. So source /etc environment, and enter, and we should be good. And actually we can check it with echo $ Java OPTS, right? Yep. And we get what we need there. Okay, next what we need to do is configure Tomcat with these directives here. And so we can do that by, let's just open a new tab here. And if I do localhost colon 8080, which is the port that Tomcat is listening on, and if I go ahead and hit enter, you can see that Tomcat is working, it is up and running, and it gives us information that we'll end up needing at some point, particularly this, but we'll come back to that. Let's see, let's go back to the DSpace installation. So what we need to do is we need to make modifications to the root directory of the Tomcat installation and then conf server XML. And let's see, where does that live? I forget. Actually, I think it's cd /etc tomcat9, and yeah, okay, so it's just in the /etc/tomcat9 directory. You'll see that the server XML document that we're after is right there. And so we'll need to configure that. We're going to have to use sudo and nano, which is our text editor. And let's see, server XML. And we're just going to use the arrow key to scroll down here a little bit. And what we're looking for is this connector port section here, all that. And what I want to do is I'm going to copy and paste what they have in the instructions, but I'm just going to delete these two lines right here. I'm going to keep that first line with port 8080 and protocol HTTP because they don't have that protocol directive here, and I don't know, I just figure I should keep that there because that's the out-of-the-box configuration for Tomcat. And then I gotta do this there. Okay, let's see, modification. So we've done, oh, you'll notice that the directory here is a little bit different. We didn't have to go into config. It was just a matter of going into etc/tomcat to get to this server XML. Okay, so we've made these changes. You can change the port at this time. I don't want to mess around with that, so I'm not going to. All right, we've done that. Let's go Control X, Y to save. All right, now so we're not using either of these, so we don't have to worry about that. IP to city database, I'm not really going to worry about that. And then git code version control. So Debian tends to come with git installed, but just in case, sudo apt install git. Okay, so it was already installed. Now the other thing that we might want to do is restart Tomcat at this point because we've made a lot of configurations. And as a systemd service, we can do that easily with the sudo system control restart Tomcat 9 service and enter. And we get a warning, the unit file source config. So when we went ahead and did this read-write path, what we needed to do was to do the daemon reload. So I'm just going to copy this command. It is something that's going to have to be run as a super user, so sudo, and then I'm just going to paste it. Okay. And now if I clear this, and if I rerun sudo system control, so I got here by doing the up arrow because I already ran this command, and if I do the up arrow, I can do commands that are in my history. Now I'm just going to go ahead and hit enter. No problems this time. Let's go to Tomcat, just see how this is looking. All right, so we're good. We are good to go. Okay, back to DSpace instructions. We've done all that, and all right, so we have finally made it to the point where we can do the backend installation. So step number one, install all the backend requirements listed above. We've done that. We've done our configurations for the most part. And so this next part, they're saying create a DSpace operating system user, which is optional. And I kind of played around with this, and ultimately it just made things more confusing and difficult. So I'm not going to do that. I am simply going to keep my super user as kind of the administrator for all of this. So I'm not going to do user add. They do say that, the choice that makes the most sense for you is really depends on how things were installed. And we use the app repository, and Debian kind of set a lot of things up for us. So it doesn't really make sense for us to create a DSpace user. So we're not going to do that. Now, what we need to do is get the latest DSpace release. So this is the latest backend release. I'm just going to click on that link. And then here they give us the backend DSpace 7.2 as of this video is the most current. I'm going to right click on source code. I'm going to copy link. We'll just go back to our instructions. Okay, so download. So we've downloaded it. Actually, we haven't downloaded it yet. We're about to do that. So I'm going to run cd change directories just so I get into my root or into my home folder. So the user Jeremiah is in the home folder now, and this is where I want to put this source code because I can run it without being sudo, which is handy. Okay, so what we need to do is run wget. Remember, don't use sudo for this. And I'm just going to paste that URL and enter. And ls to list, and you'll see that we now have this DSpace 7.2 zip. And what I'm going to do is now run unzip, and again, make sure you don't use sudo. Unzip DSpace and enter. And then if we ls, you'll see that we now have this directory here. And what I'm going to do is just remove that zip file because we don't need it anymore and could potentially cause problems when we do the interface install. So I'm going to go ahead and remove that. Okay, so we have unzipped DSpace. And what they're telling us here, for ease of reference, we will refer to the location of this unzipped version of DSpace release as DSpace source. So anytime we see DSpace source, what that means is, for us, well, for me anyway, is going to be, whoops, what did I do? Oh, I didn't do cd. Oops, and I'm going to do pwd for print working directory. So what this DSpace source means for me, in my case, is home /Jeremiah /DSpace blah blah blah. Okay, so that's important to know, and it was kind of confusing the first time I set that up, so I figured it's probably a good thing to point out. Okay, so we have unpacked the DSpace software. The next thing we want to do is the database setup. Now you recall back into the backend requirements portion of this, when we installed PostgreSql, we ended up giving that Postgres user a password. And we're going to want to use that again so that we can run these commands without problems. And I'm going to do that. Let's see what it's switch user. So su and then Postgres and asking for the password. Put that in there. Okay. And what I'm going to do is just clear this for now. So you'll see now that we are the Postgres user. And what we're going to do is really just copy and paste these directives here. Copy and paste that in there. So we should probably go over what this means. So we are logged in as the Postgres user, which is the super user for our Postgres databases. And what we're doing is we're saying that as Postgres user, we want to create a user using the Postgres user credentials. This new user will not be a super user, and password prompt so that we can set up this DSpace user. This is the user for the DSpace database, which we haven't set up yet, but that's the next step. First, we need the DSpace user, which we're doing now. Copy and paste that directive, and it's going to ask us to enter a password for this DSpace user that we're creating. So again, usually in these test environments, so that everything's easy, I just use password for everything. Of course, you're not going to want to do this in production, but I find it works well in my development environments because I never forget what the password is. Okay, so we've done that. Next, what they're saying is, so we were prompted twice for the password to create that user. Now we need to run this command here. So I'm just going to copy it. And we'll just expand this again. Paste that in there. Okay, so with this command, we are the Postgres user, so we're able to run this. If I tried doing this with my sudo user Jeremiah, it wouldn't have worked, I don't think. So what we're doing is we're saying create database. The person creating this is the Postgres super account. The owner of this database that we're creating is going to be DSpace, that one we just created up here. The encoding will be Unicode, and the name of the database is going to be DSpace. We'll go ahead and hit enter. And now, let's minimize that. They say you'll be prompted for the password, but we already did it, so they didn't ask us that time. So if they don't ask, don't worry. If they do ask, don't worry either. Just put in the password. Okay, so finally we must enable the PG crypto extension. So you remember when we installed Postgres-contrib, that gave us the ability to use the PG crypto extension. It's just now we need to enable that. So I'm going to copy this command right here. And they're telling us that you need to log in as the database into the database as a super user, which you don't have to do because you're already logged in there. So now if I just paste, let's expand this. So now if I paste that in there, so again, it's just we're running this. Actually, you know what? We don't need most of that. Yeah, actually, I don't think we need to put in this Postgres username because we're already running it as the Postgres user. So we're going to run the PSQL command on the DSpace database, create extension. I'm going to go ahead and hit enter. And let's minimize that a bit. So the create extension command should return with no result if it succeeds. So we got the create extension result, but no other errors. We're good to go. Alternative method, I've not tried that, so I can't really speak to that. Let's see, looks like we've got some Oracle instructions. We didn't do an Oracle database, so we don't need to worry about that. Okay, so next we are given some directives in terms of how to do the local.config file. And let's just minimize that. So we're going to go ahead and do that right now. So we can create our own local config file by going into the DSpace source, which we are already there, although we are the Postgres user. So we want to run the command exit. And I'm just going to clear things. Okay, so we are currently in the DSpace source directory. And so if we do ls, you'll see that we now have DSpace directory there. That's where we want to go. So cd DSpace, make sure you don't put a / here. Every once in a while I make that mistake. There's the root directory where it's going to be installed. So if you do a / here, it's going to go there rather than in this current directory. So DSpace / config and enter. ls to list the contents. You will see that we have the local config example, and they're telling us that we can use that to build our local config file. Okay, so I own all of everything here, and your user should too. If we do lsla, you'll see that my user owns everything here, which is important. Let's see, I'm just going to clear that. And what we're going to do is, okay, we're going to cp for copy, and then local, and I'm just going to hit tab to autocomplete. And then when it does that, let's see, actually, I might. So I'm going to copy local config.example to local config without the example. And then I'm going to go ahead and hit enter. And now I need to edit that file. So let's see. So we've done that. So they have a description of all the settings here, and we're just going to kind of quickly go through the file itself rather than this. All right, so we do that with nano. Remember, don't use sudo for this, and make sure you own all of this. Nano local, nano local config. And I'm just going to scroll down. So it begins with server configuration. So what they want is the installation directory that we're going to have. Now remember, we created that DSpace directory, and then I made my Jeremiah user the owner of that, which is important. And so these are all the defaults, and I've been kind of following the defaults just because they make sense to me. Okay, next we have the DSpace server URL. So that's the 8080, that's Apache Tomcat. I don't think we've configured things yet to actually get to the server, but that is where they will be. So I don't need to make any edits there. The DSpace UI, so this is the user interface. This is for the front end, which we haven't even begun to configure yet. I'm using the default. It's going to listen on port 4000, so we don't need to make any changes there. It just confuses things if we do that in a tutorial anyway. So here we can do, we can rename it if we want. I'm just going to do DSpace EOU for Eastern Oregon University. The asset store I'm not worried about. You probably don't need to uncomment this, but I'm going to. If your system is going to have a different default language than US English, then you'll need to change that. And I'm not quite sure where you would go to do that either. I wasn't really able to find that in documentation and just got distracted with other things. So, and then we need to uncomment this Solr server. And we already have that up and running. So the local host 8983, you'll see that that's where we're at here. But more on that later. But you do want to make sure you uncomment that right now. And now we need to do our database configurations. So the database URL, this is all kind of the out-of-the-box defaults. For Postgres, they don't do Oracle as the default. So if you're using Oracle, you're going to need to change that to this. But you'll see that right now we're using the Postgres template. So that's good. Same deal here. The Postgres directive is the one that is defaulted. Same with the database dialect. Now here's somewhere I'm going to have to make some changes. So you'll see that the database username, DSpace, which we created with our Postgres user, I didn't use DSpace as the password. I used password. So I need to change that. And whatever your DSpace user for the Postgres database, DSpace database is the one that you would have to use. So again, like I said, I like to use password just because I always remember. Now the database schema name, it's often public, the default for Postgres. We haven't done any weird configurations, so we don't need to change that. We don't need to change any of this. So those are all the basics. We're not dealing with SMTP servers. This is more of a development environment to kind of test things out. So I'm going to do Control X for exit and Y to save and then enter. Okay, let's go back to our instructions. We have done all of that. Okay, create the directory for DSpace Backend installation. And so now they're giving us this in place of where the root directory for our backend installation will be. And of course, as you recall, we did that in the root directory. So if I do ls-la, you will see that my DSpace directory is currently owned by my super user, which is exactly what I want. So we made the directory. I made the owner me. I didn't create a DSpace user, so it shouldn't be owned by anyone other than me right now. Eventually, I'm going to change that, but for now, it's just going to make things easier if I keep it that way. Okay, so assuming the DSpace Unix username, again, I did not create a DSpace user. I didn't need to because we use the apt repository and we can use Tomcat eventually. But for now, that user is going to be me. And what they're telling us is we need to change directories into the DSpace source. So as you recall, in my home directory, we have the DSpace source. So I just did cd to get there, and then cd DSpace. And we are now in the source directory. And we can just list the contents in there. You can set things up with Docker, so this is where you would run those sorts of commands, but we're using Maven to build this, and honestly I'm not sure which file, maybe that POM XML. In any case, we want to run MVN for Maven, so this is where we run Maven to build the installation. Okay, and package, and again, don't use sudo. Because you own this directory and everything in it in this DSpace -DSpace 7.2 directory. So you shouldn't have to use sudo, and if you do, it might give ownership to the root user, which you don't really want to do. So MVN package, enter. Okay, so this is going to take between 5 and 10 minutes. So I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording. Okay, so total time, I got the build success, total time 8 minutes, 27 seconds. That's a pretty long time. So, so if it takes a while, don't worry about it. That is normal. Okay, so what we need to do is we have built the installation package. We are on step 9, install DSpace Backend. So as the DSpace Unix user, and again, that's going to be me. We need to cd into source. So we're already in the source where we ran our Maven package command. So what we need to do now is change directories into DSpace DSpace. And remember not to put the leading forward slash, because that'll take you to the root directory. cd DSpace / target and DSpace installer. And if I do ls, this XML file here is what is going to build our backend installation. So in order to do this, we need to run ant fresh install. So ant fresh install _install. And again, don't do this as a root user or with sudo. And we'll hit enter. So that'll take a lot less time than the Maven builds. And what they're telling us is we should be able to access our REST APIs on this URL here. Although first we need to set up the Solr cores and the web apps. So I believe that's the next step. We have, let's see, install the DSpace backend. So actually what this did, if we cd into root directory and then ls-la, is we still see our DSpace directory here, still owned by me. I'm going to go in there, and then you'll see that all of our backend stuff is now loaded. Okay, so they are telling us the next thing to do is to initialize the database. They say it's optional, but I'm just going to go ahead and do that. So at this point, we're going to start seeing this root directory, which is our / DSpace directory. If you've been following along exactly what I've been doing. If you did a different name for your DSpace installation, then it's going to be there. But for us, or for this video, it's going to be DSpace. And then you'll see that we have a bin directory. So that's where all the executable binaries are. We could just go right in there, cd bin ls. And we have this DSpace command here that they're telling us we can use to do database migrate. So I could copy and paste this, but I'm already in the bin directory. So what I'm going to do is dot or period / so that means current directory. Within the current directory, run the DSpace program. And then we have some parameters to give it. So we're going to give it database and migrate and enter. And that's going to take a minute or so. So I'll just pause as it does that. Okay, so after a minute or so, you should see something like this. I assume that means it's successful. Okay, so we've done that, and deploy server web application. All right, what we need to do is they give us two ways of doing this, and what we're doing is kind of setting up the web apps so that Tomcat will find them. And they give us two techniques. Technique A, I'm not fully sure how to do that. So I'm just going to go with technique B because they are right. It is simple and complete. Okay, so what they're telling us is we need to copy all of the files from the DSpace install directory, which in this case is this, the DSpace in the root directory, and then web apps. Let's just cd back. So if you do these two dots, that just means go back one directory. And let's see, ls. And you'll see we have this web apps folder here. So if I just cd into web apps, you'll see that we have this server application here. And what they're telling us is we need to copy everything within the web apps directory, which is really only server, into the Tomcat home directory, and then that web apps directory. Now we can, if we go to Apache Tomcat, so when we check this out at localhost 8080, we get some good information here. So that the default Tomcat homepage is found at var lib tomcat 9 web apps. So this is really the directory we're after here. And actually, I think I'm just going to go ahead and copy that. And let's see, let's go back to our instructions. Okay, so copy. Now they're not using sudo here, but we're going to have to because root owns Tomcat, and that's not a problem. That's not a problem in this case. So what I'm going to do is sudo copy cp and then -r recursively, so that way we copy everything in the directory. And let's see, we will do /DSpace. Now we're already here, but I'm just going to do the full path so that there's no question as to what's going on. DSpace, let's see, what are they telling us to do? Web apps, and then / and an asterisk. And we are copying that to the Tomcat web apps. And so I'm just going to expand this. Let's paste that there. And web apps. So this is the root file path that was mentioned on the Tomcat page. And of course I've forgotten what they want us to do here. Web apps. So at the web apps, we'll just do a asterisk. I'm going to open that up a bit. And we'll go ahead and hit enter. Put in my password here for my Unix user. And now if we look at, let's do ls-la var lib tomcat9 web apps, you'll see that we have that server directory here. So we successfully copied that. All right, let's make that smaller. And okay, so we ran this command, and of course it's saying it's going to copy all of the web applications to Tomcat. It was only server, or you could have just done copy just the server. Essentially, these are going to accomplish the same exact thing as of this recording. Okay, so optionally also install the deprecated DSpace 6.x REST API. We don't really want to do that, or I certainly don't want to do that. And what we need to do next is copy the Solr cores. So you'll notice that currently there are no cores available, and we're going to change that right now. And we'll do that with, let's see, so they're telling us to copy from our DSpace install directory in the Solr application. So if we just go back one directory, cd space ... ls, you see we have our Solr directory here. Let's cd into that. And you'll see that we have these 4 modules here. And actually what we could do is just to show, if we do ls-la and do, let's see, we put Solr into the opt directory. So opt / I'm just going to start typing Solr and then tab for autocomplete and then /. So at this point we should be into the root of the Solr installation. And so we need to go to server. So server / Solr and / and config sets. And actually I'm going to need this a little bit later, so I'm just going to copy that now so we don't have to retype all of that. And I'll go ahead and hit enter. And you'll see that right now all we have is this default file and sample tech products. Okay. Oh, we didn't cd into config. So cd, right? Oh, I see. No, we did it. Yeah, okay. So you'll notice that these are not there at the moment, and that's what we're going to do now. And because I own all of this, I don't have to use sudo, so I'm not going to worry about it. Let's see, copy all those, and let's see. So CP and then -R for recursive and /DSpace /Solr, and they want us to put an asterisk here. Okay. And now this root directory for Solr and then that path, which I already copied. So we've got opt Solr server, Solr config sets. Do we need to do anything else? It doesn't look that way. I'm just going to delete that in case. And now I'll go ahead and hit enter. And if I use the up arrow to get to ls-la configs, you'll see that we now have all of those files that are also in our DSpace directory. Okay, good. So the next thing they're telling us is to make sure that the Solr user owns all of this, and I'm just making my super user, the Solr user, because remember, we didn't install this as a systemd service. This is just kind of a standalone thing, and it makes things simpler, oddly enough. Okay, so we don't need to worry about changing ownership. We already see that I own all of these. Okay, so we can restart Solr. And to do that, we'll go into our installation folder for Solr. Let's see, cd. So it's cd opt and then Solr 8.11. And let's cd into the binaries. And we don't need to list anything there. We've already kind of been over that. So I can run this command. So the period / means in this current directory, run Solr, and the parameter on that is to restart it. So I'm going to go ahead and hit that. And it's kind of shutting down before it starts back up. And I guess I'll pause as that does that. Oh, nope, it's going to go ahead and finish up quickly for us. So currently you see there's no cores available. Now that we've run that command, we should be able to refresh, and we now see in this core selector we have all of those cores that we copied over, and that's a good thing. It looks like we're pretty close to being done with the backend installation. Okay, so you can check the status of Solr and your new DSpace cores by using, so that's what we did, the localhost 8983 Solr, and it is running well. Let's see, so we can test that the search core is set up properly. Let's go ahead and do that. And really what that means is I'm just going to copy these right here. And if we go to Apache Tom, oh, not Tomcat, it's for our Solr instance. I think if I just delete that out, oops, why did it do twice? That's weird. Okay, so I believe localhost 8983 /solr /search /select. We'll go ahead and hit enter. And we get the JSON response, which is exactly what we were hoping for. So it looks like we're good there. And let's see, other things to test. So they tell us after we run that we should get the empty JSON result, which we did. Okay, cool. Now it looks like it's a matter of creating an admin account. Now I own the installation as Jeremiah currently, and I'm going to go ahead and run this command, and I could do that with just /DSpace bin DSpace and then create administrator. And I think at this point, you know, if you're running things as root, it's probably fine, I think. Don't quote me on that. Okay, create administrator. I'm just going to go ahead and hit enter. And for whatever reason, it thinks for a little bit before it pops up the info screen. So I'll just pause until that happens. Okay, after a short amount of time, you should be asked for an email address. I'm just going to use my work email, jkellogg@eou.edu. Right? Yep. We'll just put in all the information. And again, I always use password for these test environments. Okay, so we have created our administrator account. So now the moment of truth, they're telling us we should restart Tomcat. So I'll go ahead and do that. Again, it's a systemd service, so I can use system control. And you must run that as a super user. So sudo system ctl restart tomcat 9.service. We'll just make sure that looks okay. And for whatever reason, whenever I do that, it takes a while. Your initial load time takes a little while. So I'm just going to let that do its thing for a second. Okay, after a little bit, the page finally loaded, and we can continue with our tests. So they're telling us that if we go through the Tomcat directory and go to server, then we should see the REST API interface. So let's see, Apache Tomcat. Let's just / server. And we'll go ahead and enter. And you should see the HAL browser at this point. So everything is good there. And if we go now to, let's do this OAI request. So we have everything up to server so far. So I'm just going to copy and paste this part here, everything from the OAI on. And we'll copy that. And we'll come back over to the browser here. Okay, so I'm just going to delete all of this and put in the request and go ahead and hit enter. And here we get an HTTP status 500. So this is a permissions thing. And really what it means is, remember way back, really far back, when we installed Tomcat. Was it when we installed Tomcat? No. Let's see. Okay, so when we installed Tomcat, remember I said that we'll come back to this later. Well, now is the time that we're going to want to do that. And so if I cd into the root directory of the system, ls-la, as you see, our DSpace install directory is right here for the backend, and I currently own this. And I did that only because this way I didn't have to run sudo to set things up. And now it is a good idea to do sudo chown -r, so recursively, so that everything within this directory is now going to be owned by Tomcat, the user, and Tomcat, the group. And we want it on /DSpace, which is our backend installation directory. That looks good. So I hit enter. Let's do ls-la, and you'll see that Tomcat now owns this. And I can't remember if we have to restart Tomcat or not. Let's go ahead and hit refresh. Oh, so the problem here is, for whatever reason, whenever I use my shift key, it sometimes doubles what I'm typing. So let me just come back here and get this URL here. Maybe I'll just copy this. copy all that, and then go ahead and paste it. All right, does that look right? That looks right. Okay, so I just had a bad URL there. Now if I go ahead and hit enter, this is what should display. So now that we've gone ahead and made this change to the owner, Tomcat can now read and write to this directory, which is exactly what we need. Okay, let's go back to our instructions. So we've done that, and we don't need to worry about that because we already kind of see what it looks like. So with production installation, you're going to have to add HTTPS support. That is outside the scope of this video. We are just looking at building a test environment so that you can get used to what you need to do in order to build a production environment. That, and I don't really have a whole lot of network privileges here, so configuring that stuff isn't something I'm able to do. Okay, so that completes the backend installation, and at this point we will continue on with installing the front-end user interface. So we have some requirements that are needed here, and we'll go through each one of those just like we did with the front-end recording. And just like with the back end, the front end requires a Unix-like OS, so you could also use Microsoft. So we're good to go there. We have Debian 11. Next, we need to install Node.js, and they're giving us all of the versions that are acceptable for our purposes. And what I like to do is I actually like to use the Node version manager to deal with this stuff because Node's kind of a pain. And switching between Node versions is something that you kind of have to do sometimes. And I'm just going to go with the Node version manager. It just makes life easier. So I'm going to open a new tab and I'm just going to search for NVM, which is Node version manager, and I guess maybe just Git. That should get us to GitHub. Yeah, this is what we're looking for here, the NVM-sh Node version manager. So I'm just going to go right to GitHub. And really it's just a matter of looking at the README to get this installed. It's pretty easy. Let's see, so they gave us examples, installing and updating. Okay, so I'm just going to use this wget code here, and actually I'm just going to change directories. So we want to make sure we're in our root direct or in our home directory here. So pwd for print working directory. I am in the right spot, and I'm just going to copy this code here for the wget. And what this is going to do is grab this install script and then run it in bash. So I'm going to copy this. And bash is kind of the language of the terminal that we're using. Go ahead and paste that in there and then go ahead and hit enter. Okay, so now we should have NVM installed. And what we can do to find all of the versions of Node that are available to us, we could just simply run NVM ls-remote. I have to restart the terminal. So I'm going to go ahead and close my terminal after installing NVM. This way, kind of the init scripts run when you open up the bash terminal, and so in any case, you need to close down your terminal and then open a new one. So NVM ls dash, what was it, remote, I think it was. Okay, and this is going to kind of spit out all the versions that are currently available. So there's quite a bit there. Now I think, let's go back to our instructions here. It can be found there. So what they're telling us is we recommend running a long-term support version. So the latest long-term support version is 16.14.0, and as you can see, that is one of the ones that they recommend. Now you could install this specifically with the 16.14, but we're going to actually use this command here. So it's the node version manager, nvm install, and then 2 dashes, and then LTS for long-term support. So what this will do is it will simply install the latest version that's available. So as of this recording, it's 16.14, but maybe by the time others get to watching this, it might be 16.15 or 16 or whatever. So I'm going to go ahead and do nvm install --LTS and enter. Okay, so we have now installed Node, and I think we could just do node-v, and you see that we have 16.14.0, so we're good there. Okay, let's see. Do they have anything else that we need to do? Downloaded Node. Node.js is a JavaScript runtime that provides npm, so our Node package manager, that was installed with Node.js. So now we can run the npm command, which is important. Okay, now we need to install Yarn, and I'm going to install it with the Node Package Manager, which we just installed. So I don't know if I need to use sudo here or not. Let's find out. Npm install -- global, and it's probably that global flag that would cause a problem, if a problem at all. So npm install -- global yarn, and I'm going to hit enter. Okay, it looks like we are good to go there. So they added the one package. So we've installed Yarn. That was pretty easy. Okay, PM2 or another process manager for Node.js. It's optional, but they recommend for production. Well, let's go ahead and try to do that. Perhaps it will work, perhaps it won't. Let's go ahead with npm and Node Package Manager, right? And what was it? Install, and whoops, we're going to do this globally as well. Install -- global and PM2, which is pretty handy for managing your DSpace installation. And this might, nope, it's not going to take a while. So we've added a whole bunch of packages here, which is fine. Okay, so npm, and we've added the PM2 interface, and finally they're telling us we need the DSpace 7 backend, which we already went through, and there's really nothing we need to know there. Okay, so we are now on to the front end installation. Okay, so first install the front end requirements listed above and verify that the backend REST API is publicly accessible. We've done that. That was this thing here. Okay, now download the latest DSpace Angular release. I'm just going to go ahead and click on that link, and DSpace 7.2 front end UI only, which is exactly what we want. I'm going to right click on source code and copy the link. I'm just going to hit the back button here, so we're back at the instructions. Is there anything important we need to know while we're doing this? You can choose to either, okay, yep. Downloading the zip. So I'm going to be in my home directory, and I think I'm already there. You can tell that by this little tilde. But just in case, we'll check it out. And what I'm going to do is run wget, and then I'm just going to paste that URL that I copied and enter. And so you'll see we get another DSpace -7.2 zip file. That's why I deleted the one for the backend installation, was so that we wouldn't cause problems here. And now if I just go ahead and unzip DSpace -72 zip. Okay, if I do ls you'll see that we now have this DSpace Angular DSpace 7.2 directory, which is what we want. I'm going to go ahead and remove the zip file. There's no real reason to keep that. So we'll just get rid of that. Okay, so now we need to go into this new DSpace directory. So I'm going to cd DSpace and then tab to autocomplete and enter. And let's see, so they're telling us to change directory to our repo cd DSpace Angular. That's what this is here. Okay, so we're in there, and now we need to install the local dependencies. So we will do that with yarn install, and I'll hit enter. And I forget how long this takes, so I'll just go ahead and pause. Okay, after a couple of minutes, you should see that the build has been completed. And now what we need to do is create a production configuration file. So at the DSpace Angular root directory, which we're already at, there should be a directory called config. So let's just ls, and you see we have that directory right here. So we're going to cd into that config directory. We'll hit enter and ls. And what they're telling us is we need to create a config.prod.yaml file. And you can use the config.example YAML. So I'll go ahead and do that. I'm going to copy config example YAML, and now I'm going to call it config, what did they tell us? prod.yml. And then what I'm going to do is nano config prod YAML. Enter. Okay, now what we can do is just look at the syntax here, and we're looking for, I think we need to add these things. Authentication, languages. Okay, there's a lot going on there. So I think actually all we need to do is, I'm going to do Control W, and then I'm going to look for UI : see if it's there. It is. So so you're going to want to find this section in your file. Mine was just simply I did Control W for search, and then I just typed in UI in the colon, and it brought me right here. So I'm keeping all of that stuff. I don't know if it's important or not, but I'm going to keep it. And what I'm going to do is just make sure that I have a similar setup to this recommendation here. So SSL false, this is for, what is this? So this is for the user interface. I think everything we have here is fine. Yep. So everything under the UI section is good. We don't have to worry about that. Now let's go down to the REST section here, and so SSL, so this is for security certificates, and boy, this can get problematic when you are running a test environment. This is a test environment, so having to deal with SSL is going to be a pain. I'm going to change this to false. Now the API host, it's actually localhost. So whatever the name of the API server is that was created, that's what you would call it. But this is a test environment, and we're just simply using localhost. Okay, now I believe we want to keep 443 as the port. No, actually it's not, because that is the secure port. We have Tomcat 9 listening on 8080, so we won't require SSL on that port, and that will make things easier for this test environment. So this is the setup we want. If you happen to open this file and there's nothing here, which I've had happen in earlier versions, so 7.1, I think it was empty when I opened it up. You could just copy and paste this and just make sure that, this is all good, but just make sure you turn this to false and you turn this to 8080 and you turn this to localhost, and you should be good. So I'm now going to Control X to exit. I'm going to do Y to save and enter. And we will go to the next step. So syntax for 7.1, it's a little bit different here. So keep that in mind if you're trying to install 7.1 or 7.0. Okay, so new in 7.1 or above, we have 7.2. Immediately test your connection to the REST API by running yarn config check REST. I've not really had success with that in the past, but we'll go ahead and give it a shot anyhow. I assume that we need to be in this config directory as we're already there. I'm going to just paste and enter and see what happens. Config REST. Yeah, so that's happened before. I'm not quite sure how to fix that. So ultimately, I'm just not going to worry about it. And if we have issues towards the end, we know there's a problem. Okay, so hint number 1 in the UI section above, we don't need to worry about all of this. I've kind of talked about most of it. If there are other settings, okay, we don't need to worry about that. All right, now what we need to do is build the user interface for production, and this is going to use the config prod YAML and source code to create a compiled version of the UI in DSpace Angular in the dist folder. So if we just actually, I think I have to stay here, so we'll do that. And I guess what I'll do, we'll just do yarn run build :prod and enter. And I'm not sure how long this takes, so I'll just pause. Okay, after a good amount of time, you should see something similar to this. I guess this is kind of the more important thing to look at. You'll notice that there are a lot of warnings when you use these build tools. That's pretty common. So really, just you don't need to worry about it. It's okay. You probably see them and think, oh no. But more often than not, it's just build tools packages that haven't been updated recently or whatever. But in any case, don't worry about that. So you'll see that as of 7.2 and above, you only need to rebuild the UI application if you change the source code under the current directory. So I believe that's here, config, and the source directory. So let's just ls to make that out. Nope. So I'm thinking cd back ls. So I'm thinking it's probably this directory. So if you ever change anything in there, and I'm kind of curious as to what they do have in there. Okay, so yeah, if you change anything in here, and that's well outside of the scope of this tutorial, but if you change anything in there, you're going to have to rerun this yarn run and probably rebuild :prod. Unlike the previous versions where if you've made any changes to the config prod YAML file, then you would actually it was what was it? It was something different than TS file. Then you'd have to rebuild, which is nice because this takes a very long time to build. So on to step 6, assuming you are using PM2, which I think we should. We want to create a dspace-angular.json file and put the contents of this in there. It says that you don't need to put it into the DSpace Angular folder, which is right here, which is where we are. But I'm going to anyway, and the reason for that is anytime I've put it elsewhere, I've had to configure things in a way that just kind of made it a pain. So what I can do here is nano dspace-angular.json. And so what this will do, the nano editor will create this file for us. It doesn't exist, so it'll just automatically create it for us. And I'll hit enter. And I'm just going to copy this stuff here, paste it in here, just make sure there's nothing weird. Change working directory. Okay, yep. So we do need to change that. So in my case, remember my user is my super user, Jeremiah. So I'm going to have to put that in there. And oh, I see. That may have been why it didn't work in the past. I might have just left that as DSpace or something. And that should do it. So Control X to exit, Y to save, and enter. Okay, and you can actually, so you could just run this command if you're not using PM2, and it should get everything up and running. But I'm curious about the PM2. From what I've seen of it, it's kind of cool. So I want to use that. And they're telling us that the way to start that is to just do PM2 start. Oops. And I think I have to do it in the same directory that this file lives in. So that's the one that we're currently in, into the DSpace Angular file. So PM2 start DSpace Angular.json. Okay, so now, a moment of truth. We'll go ahead and hit enter. And it looks like we have an error, which is unfortunate. It may be a permissions thing. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to minimize that, and I'm going to do, I wonder if it has to be done as sudo. So let's try that. Let's try sudo star. Oh, that's right. The sudo user isn't going to have access to that. All right. So what I'm going to do is kind of give up on the PM2 and just do end or stop. Okay, so I had to stop the video because we had a fairly significant error, and I wanted to test out a few things to make this a little better. For instance, I would like everything to start up all at once. So I figured out how to do that. As I said before, I believe, you could just simply, every time you start up your machine, you could just simply run this command right here, and everything should work. But I want to use PM2 because it allows for you to do a little bit extra management of the entire system. It's a nice little program. I like it. So that's what I want to use. And in our and so a little bit earlier we ran PM2 start JSON, the JSON file that lives in our, let's see, cd DSpace, in our DSpace Angular directory. And I had shown you how to do that file. So if I just do ls, and you'll see DSpace Angular JSON there. So the error that I encountered earlier was actually just a oversight on my part. What we need to do is copy this directory name right here, and then let's nano.profile. Oops, not that's not what we're doing. We are nano DSpace Angular .json. We're going to edit this file. And so earlier, and I had to test this out, what had happened was I just had this DSpace Angular, which is not the name of my directory. So I need that full Angular directory name here rather than just DSpace Angular, and that's why I encountered that error. So I'm just gonna yeah, that's good. We don't need to do anything else here. If I do Control X and then Y to save and then enter, it should now work. Um, and I think I may have mentioned that I thought it had to run within this directory, and that's not actually true. And I don't want to run it in this directory. It's actually going to be easier if I move this into my user's home directory. So I'm just going to simply do mv for move, and then the name of the file, DSpace angular.json. And actually what I can do is just dot dot / so this just means put it back one directory. And if I do enter, well, ls, you'll see that it is no longer here. We don't see the DSpace file. Let's cd dot dot and / and ls, and you'll see that the DSpace angular.json file is here. Okay, almost there. So what I want to do now is we can start DSpace simply by logging in, and if we did that, we can do that with editing the profile. So let's lsla. So in the profile dot file, this one right here, which we've already edited once to have Solr start up, we want to go in there and nano dot profile, and you'll see that I have added this line here. So this is telling the system, all right, you need to open up a bash shell and run the following command in an interactive shell. And so you put a single quote, pm2 start DSpace angular JSON. Now this dot profile file lives in my home directory in the same directory as this DSpace angular JSON. So it must live in the same directory in order for this to work. So if you've followed what I've done so far, then this should work. Now what I want to do is test this out. So what I'm going to do is just do Control X. I can't remember if I stopped PM2 or not, so I'm just going to run PM2 stop DSpace angular.json. Okay, so it'll be stopped. Now what I'm going to do is reboot my system. Sudo reboot now. Okay, and we'll see if this all works after restarting everything. So I'm just going to pause as it does its thing. Okay, so I have restarted my machine. I have logged in again. I've waited a few seconds just to make sure those scripts run. I'm going to open up Firefox at this point, and then we can test to see if our environment works. Okay, good. So it's going to bring up my installing DSpace instructions, and I am going to just open a new tab. I'm going to do localhost localhost 4000. So this is where we go to look at the user interface. I'm going to go ahead and hit enter, and usually it takes a few seconds when you initially start up, I've noticed. So I'm going to let this just kind of think about things for a bit. I'm going to pause while it does that. Okay, so very shortly after pausing, this screen popped up. And if things are working, this actually looks a little bit different because I put in a test community as I was kind of playing around with things before doing this final bit of the tutorial. So I put in this test community, and if you're able to put in communities, you're able to pretty much do anything. So we should be good. And if this is running, that means Solr is running, that means Apache is running. So, we can always check those by going to localhost. So 8080 server is going to give us a look at our API server through Tomcat. And we can also look at localhost 8983, and that should show us Solr. And as we can see, everything's running there, so it all started up properly. After rebooting, we still have our cores. And let's just do a little bit further testing. I'm going to go ahead and log in here. So you'll recall that many minutes ago, hours ago probably, we created an admin user for DSpace, and we had to put in an email and a password. And so mine was jcallog@eou.edu. Yours will be whatever you put in there. As always, I am using password just so that it's easier for me to remember what the password is for each thing. Here I can just go ahead and click login with all of that stuff filled out. And we should get our admin interface at this point. And sure enough, we do. I'm not quite sure why it does that reload there, but okay, and so we have all of our management things here. Honestly, I have not played around with this stuff. Here at Eastern Oregon University, we decided to go with Omeka, and a lot of that has to do with the fact that I'm pretty much the only systems person, web applications person here. And Omeka is a little easier to maintain. It's far easier to hack the code. So, in my case, Omeka gives me a nice foundation to kind of build further. However, I do have to say this DSpace 7 looks very sleek. It's pretty cool. If there ever came a point where we were going to move to something different, I would strongly consider this. Now, maybe what we want to do is just make sure everything's running properly. I could do another community, so I'm just going to put in a new community. I could do test community. I could create a new community within test community, I think. But I'm just going to do another top level. I'll go ahead and click that and just top level community. Oops. And I'm just going to go ahead and save. And that should work. We want to actually test this to make sure permissions are all set up right. Successfully created the community. You would have gotten an error if you weren't able to. We could also just do another collection. And so at this point, I could do either top level community or test community. I'm going to go with top level community because I just made that one. And let's say top level community collection. And we'll go ahead and save. Okay, and so at this point, we'd be able to add an item. We could just go into new, we could do item, and then let's see, I think I'm gonna do this top level community collection. I'm gonna go ahead and put it in there. And I've actually never looked at this before, so this is all new to me too. So this is where you would come to add your items within a collection. Okay, so I think we're good. I'm not fully sure if you restart if there would be a problem or not with the startup script. I don't think there is. Actually, I think what I'll do is just pause real quick as I do a reboot and see if there's any problems with the script that we implemented in the profile. So let's see, sudo reboot now, and we'll just give this one last test. I'll pause as everything reboots, and then we'll have a look. Okay, so here we are. We've rebooted, and this is going to be our final test. I'm just going to click on the Firefox browser. We shouldn't have to open up the terminal at all at this point. We should be able to just go in and do what we need to do within DSpace, just using the web admin modules. And I'm just going to start a new session, and we'll just give a look at localhost 4000. And if this works, then that means everything else is working. And again, usually it takes a little bit for the initial startup, but once you get there, it will load much faster. And maybe I'll just pause it as we wait. Okay, so our system is now starting up. I didn't have to do anything in the terminal, and I believe at this point we officially have our test instance of DSpace 7 using Debian 11 on a VirtualBox virtual machine. Of course, if people have questions or comments, they can post them below in the comments, but I do have to just warn people that this is not something I know particularly well. So in terms of being able to answer questions, I may not be so good at it, but certainly I would give it a try. So if there are questions, certainly post them below. And if there are any open source systems that you would like to learn how to build, I am certainly open to suggestions on that. So please let me know if there's anything that you're interested in seeing. And I think that just about covers it. And I hope this was insightful and you were able to get things up and running as well. Troubleshooting this can be very problematic. There are so many different places you can look in the log files to kind of figure this stuff out. So thanks again for tuning in, and hopefully I will see you in other videos. Thanks for watching.